Right, I'll be talking about the translation of the Book of Mormon into Guarani, a problem and solutions that were used when translating the Book of Mormon into Guarani, and some resources that can be used with further translation of Guarani text, especially into LDS language. The Guarani language is spoken in Bolivia, Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil, and is the most popular in Paraguay, as there are other dialects in Bolivia and touching into Brazil. Guarani has a large influence in the Paraguayan culture, as it's the second official language along with Spanish, although Guarani is more spoken in Paraguay than Spanish. Um, this was not always the case, and it played a large influence in how Guarani is used now in today's world. In around the year 1600 is when the Jesuit missionaries arrived in South America, and when they began to teach the people of Paraguay, especially, they ran into the problem that the Guarani language was not written. So what they did is they created a Guarani alphabet using the Latin letters and made it into a written language so that they could better spread the gospel. As they did so, they needed to create words and borrow words from Spanish and able to share the gospel in Guarani with those Paraguayans. Over and around the year 1900, there began to be a ban on the Guarani language, and this was due to the political turmoil that was suffered in Paraguay. This happened for so long as the government banned Paraguay from using Guarani, whether that be at home, in school, and it was widely enforced. Then in 1992, it was opened, being a political campaign by the Colorado Party, inviting everyone to speak Guarani, and that was what won them the election. This had a huge impact on how Guarani has been used, and throughout that 100 years without Guarani, it affected the words that were used in common language and in especially religious language. So what we're going to do is look at a few texts of the Guarani Book of Mormon and talk about what influence Guarani has had on the translation and how Spanish has played a role, as this is a text with an audience of Paraguayan Latter-day Saints. This first one is the introduction of the Book of Mormon. Although it is not officially scripture and it's not translated from Joseph Smith, the introduction shows us many examples of how Spanish was used to talk about different aspects of the Book of Mormon in Guarani. Looking through these words, we can note how in Spanish there are many words here that would not have an accent. For example, with Evangelio, Profeta, Plancha, all of these would have an accent on the second to last syllable because they all end in vowels. However, in Guarani, if it ends in a vowel, the accent is going to fall on the last syllable. So we can see that although it's profeta, like we would have in Spanish, this word needs to be changed to have an accent, because if we were to read that in Guarani, it would be profeta, which would just be a different pronunciation. So not only does it keep the spelling of Spanish, but it also keeps the accent on the same place that it would be in Spanish. There are different words, however, where Evangelio, spelled with the G in Spanish, has an H in Guarani, has that change because the pronunciation would be with the J, Evangelio, in Guarani, and the H makes it Evangelio, like it would in Spanish. Other similar words would be with the KA in America, and Revelação has a double R, which shows that it's still with a re instead of what would be an H, like in Portuguese. And then there's just words that are borrowed straight from Spanish. Historiador, civilización, And then we have different ones where the term for BC is not used. So we have Aru Jesucristo Buve, which is just saying the time before Christ. There's a few more examples on the last two paragraphs of the introduction, mainly being corazón is a word shared from Spanish, which is heart, corazón, and it's very similar. However, it is spelt different, and it is a specific word in Guarani. What is the most curious is that it uses the name of the church being La Iglesia de Jesucristo de los Santos de los Últimos Días, that also has a name in Guarani that is less used. This helps us note that when translating the Book of Mormon, it was written specifically for those that were trying to understand the gospel, and they had all grown up being in the church speaking in Spanish. And this helps us see how the Book of Mormon is not just for those that only speak in Guarani, but for those that are bilingual in Guarani and Spanish. In this last example, we see a problem of the way that we can interpret deities, being that in English, we would use the Lord, which would be translated to Señor. In the Book of Mormon would be Nandejara. However, we're going to look at a few verses from the Bible and then how it's translated in the Book of Mormon in 3 Nephi 22:5. For thy maker is thine husband is going to be the same, being that Menda or Mena is going to be husband, and then it starts to change. Señor de los Ejércitos is just taken from Spanish and placed in the Book of Mormon. However, this is very different as we have Hirava Opa Ba Jara Ipuacapava. And the difference is that Jara means dueño, which would be like our landlord. And that's what Nyandija would be used for Christ. So it's still talking about Señores Ejércitos would point towards Christ, but Jara isn't a specific gospel term that is used like we would in the LDS language. Señor de los Ejércitos is the term that we would use in the scriptures that's translated more directly, because those that are going to read in Guarani are also going to have read in Spanish already. After it says Hane Redentor, which is translated to Iva Vagui de Peave, which is he that takes out the bad from them. So it's really saying, it's translating Redentor to be a specific word or a specific idea that's going to be different in that version of the Bible. We can see how the Bible was used, but it was also taken from more of the Book of Mormon terminology. The Book of Mormon version ends with Tupa being the way to say the God of the whole earth, whereas in the Bible version it says Jada, referring back to dueño, which is our landlord or our keeper. The way that we interpret this can be very different going through Guarani, and it's very special that we borrow from Spanish to keep the same meaning, being that Dios is translated directly to Tupa. However, Christ, which is Jehovah de los Ejércitos, is just going to be Señor. And it stays as Señor de los Ejércitos so that it doesn't lose that meaning. The resources that we might use to translate a different text into Guarani, there are other translations of the Bible. I have the one cited that was used in the previous slide. The Guarani translations of General Conference are going to be the best way for how LDS translators have used different languages or different language to be able to translate those talks. Textbooks and dictionaries are going to be able to help. However, they might point us in a different direction than what we might see in the text that we have now, that we have in the Book of Mormon, Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price in Guarani. The largest text that we could be waiting for would be the Bible in Guarani, translated from an LDS source, and these might be the resources that they use to do that.